Hello, everyone. Welcome to San Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you join us live, super happy to have you. Drop in the live chat, let us know where you're watching from. It's cool to kind of see where everyone's situated. If you have any comments or questions about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop it. Oh! I always forget. I have it pulled up on my phone, but I need to mute my phone. If you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. Like I said, I do have it on my phone over here. Go try to keep an eye on it the best I can. See if maybe we can get a discussion going. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with engagement and people finding the channel. If you haven't already, subscribe. We're trying to grow the community here so we can, so I can take over the world. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be a time codes down in the description. So you can kind of jump around at your will. We stream this show every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, if you haven't already, please like this live stream and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total domestic box office was just a little bit more than 67 million, which is only about a 7-8% drop. So not awful. A smaller drop than last weekend. Last weekend had an almost 20% drop. Again, this is the period where we're not going to see huge weekends, but they're going to hold, and there's going to be a lot of smaller things coming out. Big movie of the weekend was Smile 2, the sequel to the original Smile film, which I have not seen, but I would love to watch. I would love to see, how they compare. We got a comment here from San Diego saying, "Is this live?" 100% this is live. So please, share this with your friends if you're watching this. Really would help people, finding the channel. But going back here to Smile 2, opened to about 23 million, which was just a little bit below my projections of around 25 to 31 million, but certainly not outside the bounds of, all of the projections. I'm sure someone projected it to be around maybe as low as 20. So while falling below my projections, this is fine, right? It's still kind of the same general ballpark. Did have the best per theater average of the weekend at around $6,300 per theater. And this brings its, that's its domestic total. Its worldwide total is up to now 46 million off of just a $28 million budget. So it's crossed that initial threshold, right, of making back its budget. The question now is, will it hold, right? Because ideally you want to double your budget because marketing costs are not factored into that budgetary number here. I think it's been a decent success. I think it opened right around where the first one opened, but that was about a year or two ago. And that was also still kind of... Actually, when did the original Smile come out? I'm not sure. Was it... Yes, it was 2022, right? So we were still in the very last parts of the pandemic, or at least the pandemic's effect on the box office. I think it's it's good that it opened around the same amount, but the fact that it's opening at the same amount 2 years later, where everything is just more expensive now due to inflation, and that was a period where the box office was hurting and was not able to make as much money, maybe this is a disappointment. But again, only time will tell. We're in the middle of that season of, spooky season, so maybe this will have better play this upcoming weekend and then the weekend after that. Also, not quite opening this week, but we have the indie film We Live in Time, the Andrew Garfield, Florence Pugh, two of my favorite actors, together in this romantic drama film that actually opened last weekend, but is now going wide, right? So, wide is considered 600 theaters or more. So this jumped from 18th to 5th place in its second weekend, bringing in just a little over $4 million. So again, not a huge amount, but again, a film like this is not expected to make huge numbers at the box office. But again, if you look at these comparisons to its previous weekend, it's like a 1,700% jump. And if you see here, it was in 985 theaters. adding 980. So it was only in like a couple theaters. I would imagine like, 2 or 3 in LA, 2 or 3 in New York. I'm going to see it actually this Wednesday. I heard it's really, really great. And again, I love those two actors, so I'm excited to see them kind of cross over there. It has a little bit extra coming in from overseas, but not much. I think like maybe 100,000. So its worldwide total is not much different from its domestic total. Continuing this weekend, we have Terrifier 3, the big surprise success, I would say, of this quarter, if not one of the bigger surprises of this year. Dropping from first to third place in its second weekend, bringing in just a little over $9 million. So the thing with this was, it was only projected last weekend to open around 5 to 8 million, and it opened at about 14 million. Now, that being said, this drop is a little concerning, right? So it's a more than 50% drop, just barely. And I don't know, that's not awful. I mean, I think it could have just had the one weekend and it would have been fine, right? Because, last weekend we talked about how it had like an 800% return. Whereas now it's even higher. It's like almost a 2,000% return when you consider the worldwide box office at around 42 million off of, again, just a $2 million budget. So this is this movie encapsulates why why studios make so many horror films, because they're cheaper, and the ceiling is really low in terms of the budget. Like, you don't have to put that much money into it, and then but the numbers that it's able to pull in at the box office oftentimes makes it worth it. That's how Blumhouse got its start, with something like Paranormal Activity. Their strategy, Jason Blum's strategy is, make a bunch of movies really, really cheap. And if one of them takes off, it pays for the whole, not the project, but the whole kind of strategy, right? It pays off all those films that maybe didn't make back their money. So, it did add about 250 theaters despite having a 50% drop. So again, we'll see how well this plays into the next couple of weeks. But again, it could literally stop its run right now, and it's already a mammoth success, right? Also in its second weekend, we have Piece by Piece, the Pharrell Williams Lego biopic movie, dropping from 5th to 7th place, bringing in just a little over $2 million. This was something I talked about last week, that it didn't really have, it had a very disappointing opening, or not even disappointing, it fell within the projections, but considering it was made for $16 million, it's definitely so far a flop. And maybe that could change, but I'm not super, super hopeful. I did go see it. I was going to write a review for it. I normally don't do reviews for documentaries, not because I don't like documentaries, but just feel like I don't have enough expertise on documentaries to write insightful reviews. But I went to go see this because I wasn't sure, like, it was kind of straddling the line between documentary and biopic, and having seen it, I realize it is a documentary. Full stop. Obviously, it's creating all of its B-roll, and all of its footage is like being like created. But at the end of the day, it's still pulling from interviews. So I'm not gonna write a review for it. I thought it was good. I don't know if, like, this is such an interesting idea, but I'm not sure if, like, Pharrell is the one that they should have done this with. But in any case, it may be a gamble that is not gonna pay off for Universal here. And again, it's, it has made about $7.5 million, but again, it's still far off from that just meaning the budget of $16 million, let alone doubling that. Also continuing this week, we have the re-release of The Nightmare Before Christmas. They do this every year in October. Dropped from 9th to 10th place in its second weekend. Brought just a little bit over $1 million. But again, this is one of those things where it's not going to do huge numbers. It's just, we'll bring it out every year. Fans will want to go see it on the big screen, even though they own the DVD and the Blu-ray and the 4K disc, and it's on Disney Plus, and they have it everywhere. They want to go see it. on the big screen. Go see it with like-minded fans. So again, it's not ever going to be a huge moneymaker, but it's, it makes money, if that makes sense, right? I did have the lowest per theater average of the top 10 at around $600. But if you look at it, its total domestic, and looking at it, these total numbers are for its entire existence here, right? So it's made domestically about 92 million, and worldwide about 107 million off of just an $18 million budget. So, it's like an almost 500% return. And, again, every year, if they can make a couple extra $1 million, that only helps, right? I got a comment here from JJ Because saying, referencing Piece by Piece, I think the idea of a documentary aimed for kids is a unique idea. When you think about it, I appreciate it for that greatly. Yes, exactly. I completely agree with you, but at the same time, I feel like that may have been its undoing. And I had said this before I saw it, and now that I've seen it, I really think this, is that it's unclear who the audience for this was, right? Because, people who are really into, like, the history of hip-hop, and this is obviously broad strokes, but my guess would be people who are super into the history of hip-hop and the kind of music Pharrell has produced are not going to be super interested in going to see a Lego movie of any kind. Not that they shouldn't, I think they should be interested, but just because there's a stigma of animation in the United States, especially like a Lego movie, is, like Legos are for kids, right? This isn't how I feel. This is just, I would imagine, like the broad consensus of people who don't love movies. They just like to maybe sometimes go to the movies. So you have that. But then for kids, I don't know if they really care enough about Pharrell Williams by name to want to go see this movie. And now having seen it, it was surprisingly, like, it really earned that PG rating. Not that it's super inappropriate, but it's definitely not for, like, necessarily a G-rated audience. Not because it's inappropriate, but just the subject matter is not something that I think a 6-year-old is gonna be held by. So while I thought it was good, it was much better than it had any right to be. I think the box office numbers reflect what I'm saying, that it's kind of a film in search of an audience that, and people like you and me, JJ, because are like the perfect little intersection, but there's not that many people in that intersection. So, unfortunately, if only we could unshackle ourselves from the demands of capitalism in our art, but unfortunately, that's the world we live in, right? A couple other notes here. We still have the Wild Robot. This is exciting. So speaking of animation, and why animation is not just for kids. So the Wild Robot holding its second place spot in its fourth weekend, brought in just a little over $10 million, about a 28% drop. This is a film that from the jump had been kind of pitched, in terms of like its box office narrative, was being pitched as, we're in this is a marathon, not a sprint. And when it opened, it didn't open huge, right? Especially considering its budget. But the idea was to be something kind of like Elemental, right? The Pixar film from last year. A film that did not open well. In fact, that opened pretty disastrously, whereas this one opened fine. But then held, right? And every weekend just kept making money and money to end up becoming one of the more successful films of 2023. So, couldn't happen to a better film. Wild Robot is great. I ended up being really busy the week that I was going to write the review for that film, so I didn't end up writing a formal review, but I thought it was really, really great and one of the better films of the year so far. And it's holding really well, right? So if you see that domestic multiple column, it's kind of made up numbers, but, I kind of put, if it's in the yellow 2 zone, it's has fine legs. If it ends up going over 3, it's in the green zone, I'd say that's pretty good legs. Blue would be 4, that's really great legs. This number is calculated by taking the total domestic box office and dividing it by the opening weekend. Because ideally you want to see that, it's not just like the opening weekend is accounting for most of your box office, right? You want to see it spread out, and because that reinforces this idea that people are into the film, coming back to it, or spreading the word about it, right? This brings its worldwide total to about 196 million over a $78 million budget. So while not a huge success, the critical acclaim is unbelievably good. which is, I'm sure, going to get a lot of awards attention, which I'm sure DreamWorks would love. And it is technically a success, right? It has doubled the budget, and like I'd said, we're not going to have too many big family animated films until Moana 2. And that's not for like another month. So this has the potential to kind of, keep holding week to week. Also still in the top 5, we have Beetlejuice in its 7th weekend, dropping only from 3rd to 4th. This is a movie that, I gotta apologize to, because I had said, I'm sure I'll do fine, but I just feel like Beetlejuice is not a strong enough brand to warrant the kind of marketing push it was having, but I think it seems to have paid off, right? So it only brought in about $5 million this weekend, but again, once you've been in theaters for 7 weeks, the fact it's still in the top 10 is always nice to see. It had a little drop, around like 32%. This brings its domestic total to about $284 million, worldwide total to about $435 of just a $100 million budget. So this is not one of the most successful films for Warner Brothers by far this year in terms of like percent return, but it is definitely a strong success, and I wonder if we're gonna get a Beetlejuice. I know I just said it. I know I'm gonna screw myself. I'm sure he's waiting right in the corner for the live stream to be over, and then he'll pounce on me. But maybe Warner Brothers is having that conversation. What else do we have here? Joker Folia Dub. It's dropped from 4th to 6th in its 3rd frame. Another huge drop, right? So last week had like an 80 or 75% drop. This weekend, 69% drop. It lost like 1,200 theaters. I think theater owners are like, screw this. We want to distance ourselves from this film because neither critics nor audiences have really embraced this film. You need at least one of those. So it definitely was a big backfire for Warner Brothers. Talk about successful or not successful films for Warner Brothers. Interestingly, this film has made most of its money overseas, right? So its domestic total is like $56 million. Worldwide, it's like $192. I'm curious now what the split was for the original film when it came to domestic box office versus overseas. And it was similar. And by similar, I just mean it was more international. So the original film made over $1 billion with a B. 31% was domestic. 69% was worldwide. Or international, I should say. So all the non-domestic markets. So I don't know why that would be. Because it's not like, typically a lot of American films, the American films that do really well overseas are the ones that are more big budget spectacles because that transcends language and even if you have subtitles, it transcends cultural norms, right? So it's hard for like a comedy to do well in another country because even if you have the subtitles, you might lose the nuances of the joke or, just certain things won't be funny for other cultures and communities. Well, and while this is not a comedy, this is very much, this and the last film are both like talkie movies. They're talkies. So I'm very surprised to see this do as well as it has overseas. But again, it might be overseas that at least salvages this, right? Because it was made for $200 million. So it's still in the red. Will it double the budget? I don't think so. I don't think any amount of domestic market, international markets, I don't think those are going to push it over the 300 million mark. But as viewers of the show have heard, I am wrong all the time about these kind of things, but I really feel like this is just not going to happen. And then one last thing, I'll talk about Transformers 1 here. Still in the top 5, the top 10, dropping from 6th to 8th place in its 5th frame. Only brought in just a little less than $2 million. Again, this is one of those films that has admittedly had some legs, but has had a very slow start. Because this is a film that you would think would open way bigger, like an animated Transformers film. But Paramount kind of did the same mistake it did with the Ninja Turtles movie from last year, where just the marketing was just pitiful. Either bad trailers or not enough exposure. So this did not open very well. But it's kind of slowly bringing in its money. So its domestic total is about 57 million. Worldwide, it's like 119, right? So off of a roughly $111 million budget, it's crossed that initial threshold. Now, can they get to, the $200 million mark? I don't know. That's debatable. I also see in the comments, Viviana, right? Do not bring that demon into my house. Sorry, Viviana. I've already said it. It is done. And looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have Venom: The Last Dance, the third Venom film. Venom, the Eminem song. I'm sorry, that was really cringe. But this is the third one coming out. I've always found these movies annoying if for nothing else, because it posits a world without Spider-Man, or a universe, or like a reality where Spider-Man doesn't exist. But the reason why Venom looks the way he does is because he's modeling himself off of the Spider-Man costume. So in this universe, why would Venom look like that? That, I know it's really nitpicky, but it just goes to show, it feels very cynical that the studios are just like, oh, we're just gonna have a Venom movie, even though we can't have Spider-Man in it because we can't do that. And it's just like, oh, well, hope audiences don't notice. But it's projected to make about 59 to 72 million. This is a picture from the film where Venom is gonna take over a horse. So there's gonna be like a Venom demon horse creature, which seems kind of interesting. I mean, I thought the first one was hilariously bad. The second one was actually kind of okay. So I'm not sure how this one's gonna be, but it's tracking to be one of the bigger releases of October. And then also we have a smaller, more awards film, Conclave, bringing in, roughly estimated to bring in about 7 to 10 million. This is being directed by the guy who did the All Quiet on the Western Front remake, or adaptation, if you will, from a couple of years ago that obviously had a lot of Oscar love and awards love. I'm really excited about this movie. It's basically about a fictional conclave, right? So after the Pope in the Catholic Church dies, all the cardinals meet up, basically sequester themselves, and they debate about, and they vote, and it's this. So I guess this film it's had its festival premieres, and it's supposed to kind of be almost like political intrigue, but it's about the election of a Pope, and as a Catholic, I find that very interesting. I've always found that idea interesting, so I'm super excited to see this. But again, it's not going to open very big. But again, movies like this aren't about necessarily making a huge amount of money, at least in their opening run. Then they get awards, and then they open wide, and they're available to rent digitally, and they're on streaming, and that's how they make their money, from the awards prestige. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. All right, let's talk about story number 1. So Liam Payne, one of the former members of One Direction, has died at age 31, which is insane because I'm only 27. I know I look like I'm 40 or 50-year-old math teacher, but this was a young man. So he fell 3 stories from his hotel balcony in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The drop was about 13 to 14 meters, so that's about 42 to 46 feet. That's again, 3 stories, it's really far. A spokesperson for the Security Ministry of Buenos Aires municipality said Liam had, quote, thrown himself from the balcony of his room, end quote. So again, there's I don't even want to say suspicion because it seems all but confirmed, but it all signs are pointing to that this was not a pure accident, unfortunately. Police had been called to the hotel because of a, quote, aggressive man who could be under the influence of drugs or alcohol, end quote. And in the 911 call, the hotel manager even said, quote, he's in a room with a balcony and we're afraid that he could do something that threatens his life, end quote. So by the time the medics arrived, he had already fallen off the balcony. There was nothing that they could do. And the autopsy concludes that he died from multiple traumas, internal and external bleeding, and a cranial injury as a result of his fall. So let's rewind the clock a little bit. If this was like the Liam Payne biopic, that's how the movie would start, and then the clock would go backwards, right? So a little bit of background on One Direction, right? So if you for some reason don't know what One Direction is, it was a hugely popular, if I have any younger viewers, I can't overstate this, hugely popular, bold, underline, italicize, change font size, all of it. Hugely popular boy band from the 2010s, consisting of 5 members: Niall Horan or Horan. I'm not a one directioner, so I make some of these wrong. So Niall Horan, Harry Styles, Louis Tomlinson, Zayn Malik, and Liam Payne. Right. They did not come together naturally, right? So each of them had auditioned for X Factor individually in 2010. And X Factor's is like a British, if you don't know, is like a British singing competition show. It's kind of like their version of American Idol. In fact, I think X Factor may have even come before American Idol. None of them made it past, I guess there's like a boot camp stage, and they're divided up by boys, girls, and groups. None of the 5 made it far enough into the boy boot camp stage. But then, and there's some disputed, accounts of who had the idea. Simon Cowell says he had the idea. I think one of the other judges said she had the idea. But at some point, someone decided to take these 5 talented young men, again, all teenagers at the time, I believe, and put them together as a group to compete in the groups category, where they did end up succeeding in the boot camp stage. But they were complete strangers. They were not, unlike some of the boy bands or, the band people always compared One Direction to in terms of like the cultural effect, were the Beatles, right? Whereas the Beatles met organically, and I don't know if all of them, but at least some of them were all from like the same town. These 5 young men were all complete strangers to each other. And they ended up doing fairly well, more than fairly well, in X Factor. They didn't win, but they made it to 3rd place. So they, definitely made it pretty far. And of course, kind of like what we see in the United States with American Idol, sometimes it's the runner-up or runner-ups that end up having a bigger career, right? So over the course, basically from like 2010 to 2016, the band was active, and they had a bunch of huge songs on the radio. A few of which, in no particular order, but these are the ones that I tried to rattle off the top of my head. What Makes You Beautiful, Live While We're Young, Night Changes, and Story of My Life, I feel like are the ones. Like, I figure if I know them off the top of my head, those are the big ones, right? Because I'm not, again, a huge One Direction fan by any means, but I know those songs, right? And again, they were a massive success. It wasn't just that they were popular, right? Variety notes that the group had sold, I should say, 70 million records. 70 million. And Rolling Stone notes that they sold 2 million concert tickets, which I guess that's insane, right? And the comparison with the Beatles is not unwarranted. Maybe not in terms of the quality, but in terms of the effect that it had on fans, particularly young girls, right? Young girls were obsessed with One Direction, and there was echoes of Beatlemania, right? Of working yourself up into almost like a hyperventilating frenzy at the sight of these very cute boys that you can see above me here. And again, the boy band elements were really played up, right? So, photo shoots, like it was very, it felt like a new coat of paint had been put on the boy bands of like the 90s and early 2000s, like Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, but a new kind of 2010s flair. And again, they would be mobbed by people all the time. I have a quote here from Liam from a prior interview saying, quote, "I can remember when there were 10,000 people outside our hotel. We couldn't go anywhere. It was just gig to hotel, and you couldn't sleep because they'd still be outside," end quote. So again, it was obsessive fandom. The group really fell apart in 2016. Zayn left the group to do solo work in that year, and then everyone started kind of departing as well, and then eventually the group just was dissolved, like the Soviet Union, right? So let's focus on Liam for just a moment. So he was born in Wolverhampton, England. Kind of more humble beginnings, right? Liam says in an interview, he said, quote, "It was great, though we didn't have much. Dad was in debt, but they did the best they could. It makes you dream a bit, end quote. So again, it seems like a very normal, middle class upbringing. kind of rags to riches, the aspiration of becoming a star, right? He originally auditioned for X Factor in 2008. And Variety notes that Simon Cowell, who was one of the judges, told him to come back when he was older. He also at this time met Judge Cheryl Cole, who, weirdly enough, like they began dating in 2016, despite her being like 10 years older than him and having met him when he was like 15 or 16, however old he was. But they were very much adults, both of them, once they started dating. And they did end up having actually a son together, named Bear Gray Payne. So fast forward a couple years, 2010, One Direction kind of gets formed as like this group for X Factor. He was only 16 years old when the band was formed. And Time Magazine notes, and this is really important, especially for the boy band element of it. Each member of the band had kind of like a persona, right? Whether or not it was accurate was debatable, and the personas maybe kind of shifted over the years, but at least when they were initially conceived, it's like you have your silly one and more mysterious one, and like they all kind of got assigned these characteristics or attributes. And Liam kind of got stuck with being the responsible one, right? And the Independent notes that this may have hurt his solo chances, right? So if you kind of end up in this boy band being stuck with being like the parent in the room, the straight man to everyone's comic relief, once everyone splits up, you're going to be naturally, you're not going to be as interesting, or people aren't going to be as interested in you or your work. And I think, and Viviana commented here, his nickname Daddy Payne, right? This idea that he was almost like the dad of the group. And not to, I hope this isn't hurtful to say, because of course this is really tragic what's happened, but I feel like looking at the five of them, I feel like he's the most forgettable one. Like I could, if I saw any of them individually, I knew that they were part of One Direction, but I don't know if I were to see Liam Payne by himself, I would have been like, oh yeah, that's the guy from One Direction. But again, that I'm also not a One Directioner, so maybe I'm just ignorant. But his contribution to the group was pretty sizable. So he became a prolific co-writer of a lot of these songs, and he ended up with 30 credits overall, second only to Louis in the band. So he had an impact on this group, despite him, again, kind of ended up being the least memorable of the five. And in post One Direction, again, they all end up doing their solo stuff. So he did sign a solo record deal in 2016. That, I think up to this point he was working on a second album. But again, it wasn't anything that, not the success that someone like Harry Styles has had, who's been the most successful. He's on the opposite end. He's been probably the most successful, post One Direction. And Liam was very forthright talking about his struggles with drinking and suicidal thoughts. And he did an interview last year where he said, quote, "I'm sober now over 100 days. I feel amazing. I feel really, really good. And the support from the fans has been really, really good. So I'm super happy," end quote. Though recently, there had been news about that he had gotten into a little bit of legal issue, and he was maybe getting semi-canceled recently. His ex-girlfriend Maya Henry had issued a cease and desist letter, and Henry basically makes her allegation saying, quote, "Ever since we broke up, he messages me, will blow up my phone, not only from his phone, it's always from different phone numbers too, so I never know where it's going to come from. He'll create new iCloud accounts to message me. It's always a new damn iCloud account. Every time I see one pop up on my phone, I'm like, here we fucking go again. Also, he will email me. Not only me, but he'll blow up my mom's phone. Is this normal behavior to you?" End quote. So she accuses Liam of weaponizing his fans against her. Like mobilizing those fans and sending them out to, condemn her or minimize whatever she was trying to say. And she also claimed Liam would use suicide as a quote-unquote manipulation tactic. Saying, quote, "He would always message me ever since we broke up saying, 'Oh, I'm not well.' He would always play with death and be like, 'Well, I'm going to die. I'm not doing well,' end quote." And that's something that unfortunately is a real thing, where people who are genuinely in need of help will kind of lean on that and use that to get their way or garner sympathy or whatever. And and that's not to minimize, because I don't think he was lying. But he wasn't getting the help he really needed, it seems. And so why this happened in Argentina? He was in Argentina for Niall's concert. And he had posted a Snapchat story before going to Argentina saying, quote, talking about Niall, quote, I think we might just go and say hello. It's been a while since me and Niall have spoken. We've got a lot to talk about. And I would like to square up a couple things with the boy. No bad vibes or anything like that, but just, we need to talk, end quote. And I don't know why all the quotes of this Snapchat story on all these different publications all included the Is it because it's supposed to show his potential suicidal inconsistent or indifference or what, I don't know, but I just noticed that was kind of funny, even though this is not a funny situation. So the reaction has been an outpouring of sympathy and pain, right? So I got a lot of kind of quotes or observations here from people. So starting with Liam's family and friends, his family put out a statement saying, quote, we are heartbroken. Liam will forever live in our hearts and we'll remember him for his kind, funny, and brave soul. We are supporting each other the best we can as a family and ask for privacy and space at this awful time, end quote. And I see Viviana's comment here. I think Louis was technically the oldest, but he was too silly. Kind of the idea that, exactly, yeah, that this was a, they were just kids. I think they were all kind of silly. And, and again, 31 is obviously you're not a kid anymore, but, you started this, experience of fame so young. I got another quote here from his current girlfriend, Kate Cassidy, saying, quote, I've been at a complete loss. Nothing but the past few days have felt real. I ask and pray that you'll give me the grace and space to navigate this in private. Liam, my angel, you are everything. I want you to know I loved you unconditionally and completely. I will continue to love you for the rest of my life. I love you, Liam, end quote. Also, his former partner, Cheryl Cole, who of course is the mother of his son, said, quote, as I try to navigate this earth-shattering event and work through my own grief at this indescribably painful time, I'd like to kindly remind everyone that we have lost a human being. Liam was not only a pop star and celebrity, he was a son, a brother, an uncle, a dear friend, and a father to our 7-year-old son. A son that now has to face the reality of never seeing his father again, end quote. And again, I think that's something we think about or forget about is that, these are real people. Celebrities are people. They may live very different kinds of lives, but they're still human beings. And there are people that love them and people that feel they've been wronged by him. And he's a complex human being. Another quote here from his ex-girlfriend, Danielle Peaser, saying, quote, like all of us, I too am grieving and need to take some time to do that privately. It's a heartbreaking time which has already been made so much more challenging due to receiving negative and misinformed comments as well as preconceived judgment from those who don't personally know me, Liam, or anything about our relationship over the last 14 years, end quote. In terms of the fans' response, again, an outpouring of just devastation. There was a candlelit vigil outside of his hotel, of the hotel where this happened. Even in Argentina, which goes to show how widespread, the One Direction fandom was. A 26-year-old fan, Martina Belostqui, I'm going to mispronounce these. These are like Spanish names, but this is in Argentina. Martina says, quote, I'm feeling heartbroken. I remember when I was a kid, I had a lot of bullying in my school and his songs helped. I'm devastated. I came as soon as I heard the news. I saw him at Niall's show a few weeks ago. He was singing and dancing and jumping, end quote. And again, I think that speaks to this idea that a lot of times people who are hurting in this way are really good at hiding it, right? Hiding it for the sake of others and hiding it for the sake of themselves, I think, sometimes. That, it's like if you can pretend to be happy, maybe it'll make you happy. And we know that just isn't really always the case. I got another quote here from a 25-year-old fan, Mariana Pinto, in Argentina, said, quote, I met him when I was 12. He was with his family and asked for a picture. He was so nice. I was so shy. He tried to talk to me, but I couldn't say anything. I regret that, end quote. Another quote here from an 18-year-old fan, Juana Rell, saying, quote, I've always loved One Direction since I was little. To see that he died and that there will never be another reunion of the boys is unbelievable. It kills me, end quote. And that's something I was talking about with my fiance Viviana, who's been commenting in the live chat, that, she's been getting texts from people that she hasn't talked to in years, but they were friends when they were children. And they had this shared bond of being One Direction fans. and how the bonds of fandom, because again, like maybe it was kind of cringe and maybe a little over the top at times, but this is a very parasocial relationship. You feel, whether it was fabricated or not, you feel like these young men. So when he dies, it feels like, if not a friend has died, someone you went to high school with has died, and it's something that you need to reconnect with old friends the way, like, someone, if you know someone who used to go to high school with who died, you might get a text from your old classmates being like, I can't believe this happened, right? It kind of brings you back together in certain ways. The industry is also responding in similar tones. Simon Cowell, who, of course, again, was instrumental in bringing this group together, said, quote, "You never really know how you feel about someone until a moment like this happens. Liam, I am truly devastated, heartbroken, and I feel empty. And I want you to know how much love and respect I have for you," end quote. Quote here from Dermot O'Leary, who hosted the X Factor when the boys were on, said, quote, "I remember him as a 14-year-old turning up to audition on the X Factor and blowing us away singing Sinatra. He just loved to sing. He was always a joy, had time for everyone, polite, grateful, and was always humble. Sending love and prayers to his family," end quote. I got a quote here from Cher Lloyd, another British pop star of the era who was also on X Factor that season, who competed against them. She said, quote, "From being on the show together, visiting each other's homes while filming, going on tour together, and watching you achieve your dreams, I'll cherish the memories made and the laughs we had. My thoughts are with your family and friends, with everyone who loves you. My heart is breaking for your son, Bear. Rest in peace, Liam," end quote. I got more. The support keeps on coming. Ed Sheeran, who worked with Liam on his solo single "Strip That Down," which I think is a funny name for a song. Sheeran said, quote, "At a loss for words, my thoughts are with his family and loved ones. Every memory I have with him is a great one. Just such a heartbreaking situation," end quote. And Rita Ora, who is also another singer who had worked with Liam on the 2018 song "For You," said, quote, "He had the kindest soul. I will never forget. I loved working with him so much. He was just such a joy to be around on and off stage. This tragic news breaks my heart. Sending all my love and prayers to his family and loved ones. Our song "For You" takes on a whole new meaning for me now," end quote. And then, maybe most importantly, we have kind of statements from the band, right? His former bandmates. So the band as a group put out a statement saying, quote, "We're completely devastated by the news of Liam's passing. In time, and when everyone's able to, there will be more to say. But for now, we will take some time to grieve and process the loss of our brother, who we loved dearly. The memories we shared with him will be treasured forever. For now, our thoughts are with his family, his friends, and the fans who loved him alongside us. We will miss him terribly. We love you, Liam," end quote. In addition to making a group statement, each of them also put out little statements that I'm just going to kind of read in kind of rapid fire succession here. So Louis said, quote, "I am beyond devastated to be writing this, but yesterday I lost a brother. Liam was somebody I looked up to every day, such a positive, funny, and kind soul," end quote. Zane wrote, quote, "I never got to thank you for supporting me through some of the most difficult times in my life. When I was missing home as a 17-year-old kid, you would always be there with a positive outlook and reassuring smile and let me know you were my friend and that I was loved," end quote. Niall writes, quote, "I sadly didn't know that after saying goodbye and hugging him that evening," referencing the concert he went to, "I didn't know that after saying goodbye and hugging him that evening, I'd be saying goodbye forever. It's heartbreaking," end quote. And then Harry also wrote, quote, "I will miss him always, my lovely friend. His greatest joy was making other people happy, and it was an honor to be alongside him as he did it," end quote. And again, they were brought together so young, and spent, again, years together working on songs, doing press events, going on world tours. I think the word brother is apt here. That when you're with someone that much, it really transcends friendship. Because, there's always talk with bands like this, specifically One Direction, about like the beef or the tension in the group, whatever. But I think when you're together like this, in the way they were, at a certain point, it doesn't matter that if there was beef and tension, like they were brothers. And it's just really sad to see. What's been interesting about this, though, is the media's kind of covering of this. So Cheryl Cole, of course, the mother of Liam's son, called out the media for the coverage of his death, saying, quote, "What is troubling my spirit the most is that one day Bear will have access to the abhorrent reports and media exploitation we have seen in the past 2 days. It is breaking my heart further that I cannot protect him from that in his future. I am begging you to consider what use some of these reports are serving, other than to cause further harm to everyone left behind picking up the pieces. Before you leave comments or make videos, ask yourself if you would like your own child or family to read them. Please give Liam the little dignity he has left in the wake of his death to rest in some peace at last," end quote. And am I part of the problem? I'm making a video about this, right? I'd like to think I'm trying to cover this as delicately and sympathetically as I can, while still also giving you kind of a full kind of breadth of the situation. But there's definitely been some outlets that have, again, because it's capitalistic, it's not really about values or ethics. It's about, okay, what's going to make the most money? And TMZ is no stranger to this kind of behavior. And of course, they got in trouble for posting death photos of Liam Payne. So TMZ said, quote, "TMZ obtained a photo showing Liam's body on a wooden deck at the hotel with tables and chairs nearby. We're not showing the whole body, but you can clearly see his tattoo, a clock on his left forearm, and a scorpion on his abdomen," end quote. TMZ got into trouble, has gotten in trouble a million times with things like this, but they got in a lot of trouble when Kobe Bryant died. Tragically, him and his daughter, I think they posted photos, or maybe briefly, or they were breaking the news before the family had even been notified. And I think typically the rule of thumb is like, wait until the family is notified, so they're not finding out from the news that like their loved one has tragically passed. So this is not surprising, right? They later removed the photo due to the backlash. But again, it's kind of like too little too late. So Cheyenne Sardarizada, I'm so sorry, a journalist at the BBC, said, quote, "TMZ is trying to get clicks and ad money off of a young man's dead body just minutes after the news of his death. Imagine being a member of Liam Payne's family and seeing this," end quote. And again, what kind of future is Bear going to grow up into? This is all going to be on the internet. And again, like I said, celebrities are people too. And Vanity Fair writer Chris Murphy, I think, put it best, saying, quote, "It's the idea of the discussion that had to have gone down at TMZ related to what to do with the photos of Liam Payne, which disgusts me the most. That just doesn't happen. Someone makes the call to post those photos, which is the least human thing you can do in the moment," end quote. Again, this idea that, that doesn't happen by accident. It required thought and conversation back and forth, and they still decide, yeah, let's do it. Viviana writes here in the comments, I think maybe about something I was talking about earlier. "I don't know why, but the whole thing feels like a bad dream. It's crazy to think that he's gone, that it's even possible. It's really upsetting." It is. Because again, he's not just a celebrity. Because of the nature of the fandom, he feels like he's part of your family or part of your friend group, or at least you knew him personally. And again, because he's just so young. It's not, obviously our generation, when we're in senior citizen homes and Harry Styles dies when he's like 80 something, we're obviously going to react to some kind of way because he was important to us when we were younger. But he'll have been 82 as opposed to Liam Payne, who's had most of his life ahead of him. And it really speaks to this issue that I'm not the first to note, that teen fame is dangerous. Children and teenagers who are in the spotlight because they're entertainers or singers or actors or whatever it is, they're more likely. I was trying to find like a specific study of this, but obviously there's not like full studies of something like this. But I would imagine if you were able to look at the data, the statistical probability of you developing mental health related issues or disorders or addiction in those scenarios, I'm sure is orders of magnitude greater than if you're just like a normal person, right? It's just too much given to developing minds, too much responsibility, too much stress, and too much reward, right? Because the brain, the numbers now are saying like our brains aren't fully developed until, we're like 25 or something, right? The brain is still developing. So if it's forming and developing in this environment of money and success, when that goes away, it's really hard to cope, right? Because your brain has conditioned itself on a certain level of dopamine that it's not going to be able to get anymore. And on top of that, it's also hard to develop an identity. This is the most formative parts of your life, and you're spending it as an adult. You have a job, you're traveling, you're doing all this stuff. And Liam was actually in therapy for 2 years following the split up of the band, saying, quote, "It was difficult to start because I didn't really know anything about myself. It was a bit of a numb feeling," end quote. Because again, they joined when he was a teenager. He was 16. It's just the way we allow children to be put in these situations because adults are able to make money off of them is abhorrent. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. So Rebecca Ferguson, who was a runner-up on that season of X Factor, said, quote, "I can't help but think of that boy who was hopeful and looking forward to his bright future ahead. If he hadn't jumped on that train and jumped in that taxi," I think meaning like going and auditioning for X Factor, "I believe he would be alive today. I've spoken for years about the exploitation and profiteering of young stars and the effects many of us are still living with, the aftermath and the PTSD. Many of us are devastated and reflective today as it has finally taken its first victim," end quote. Sharon Osbourne, who was an X Factor judge at the time, said, quote, "Liam, my heart aches. We all let you down. Where was this industry when you needed them? You were just a kid when you entered one of the toughest industries in the world. Who was in your corner?" End quote. And Guy Chambers, who was a former songwriter for another child star, but from a generation before Robbie Williams, Guy Chambers says, quote, "I do think putting a 16-year-old in an adult world like that is potentially really damaging. I know in Robbie's case with Take That," which I think was like the boy band he was in, "there wasn't any proper protection set up to look after what were teenage boys. That was a long time ago, but I don't see much sign of change. There is not much real care taken that I observed from people involved in the big television talent shows. I would suggest that people should not be in a boy band until they are 18, and the industry should stick to that too," end quote. And Viviana writes here in the comments, "Yeah, we kind of all grew up together because they did a lot of videos and answered questions in onesies, LOL, like they were silly and relatable, so it hurts like a childhood friend has died." Exactly. That, you really felt like this is someone you knew and loved, and the industry doesn't really care. It just eats these people and spits them back out, and it's like, it's literally how food digestion works. You eat something, the body sucks out all the valuableness from it and then shits out what's left. And that's kind of what the industry is like for child stars. And I think, we need, when it comes to actors, maybe it's a little trickier because like if you need a 8-year-old to be in your movie, you need an 8-year-old to be in your movie, but there should be way better protections. And when it comes to music, if you could sing really well when you're 14, most likely you'll be able to sing really well when you're 18. We really should have a lot more restrictions, if not complete prohibitions of children being part of this kind of world. Okay, let me grab a quick drink. That was a long story. Okay. Ooh, let's talk about something a little lighter. Let's talk about story number 2. So Amazon has confirmed that it plans to stream live news coverage on this upcoming election night on Tuesday, November 5th. Right? 5th, yeah. It's titled Election Night Live with Brian Williams. This notes Williams' first major appearance since leaving MSNBC in 2021. And Williams said upon this news, saying, quote, "After 41 years in the business, from local news to network shows to cable news, this feels like the next big thing. And the global marketplace of Amazon is a natural home for this first of its kind venture. Together, we will follow the storyline on election night wherever it leads us," end quote. It's going to include contributors across news and traditional media. It's going to begin at 5 p.m. Eastern on that day, Tuesday, November 5th. And notably, it's going to stream on Prime Video. And I believe, and I think it's in my notes down below here, you won't need to have a Prime or Prime Video subscription to watch it. Albert Cheng, who's the VP and head of Prime Video, said, quote, "This nonpartisan live special will draw from major news sources and complement the various partner news channels available on Prime Video. Our comprehensive offering is designed to give today's viewer a direct and seamless way to keep up with election results," end quote. So this is definitely a big swing on the part of Amazon, but it's also a big, or it could be a big return for Brian Williams. So Brian Williams' journey, he's been a reporter since like the 1980s. Then he ended up becoming a correspondent for the NBC Nightly News program in 1993. Famously, eventually became the anchor of that program in 2004. And even perhaps more famously, was suspended and later removed from the show in 2015. And the reason why, this is actually before Me Too. As far as we know, there's no sexual crimes that he committed, but, it came to light that he may have exaggerated some of the events that he took part in terms of when he was reporting on things like the Iraq War and Hurricane Katrina. So, for example, like I think he talked about being in a helicopter that was receiving rocket launcher, like grenade fire. And it turns out he was in the other helicopter, watching it happen to the other helicopter. But he made it seem like he was in the helicopter. He was trying to make himself seem cooler, I guess. So he got suspended in 2015. He ended up getting demoted, right, to MSNBC in 2016. Where he stayed until 2021, right? So this could be, a big, if Amazon really, if this is the beginning of something for Amazon, this could be a real big comeback for Brian Williams in a big way. Because again, this marks Amazon's first foray into live news. They've already been dabbling in live television, period. But this is the first time they're really getting into news. The company emphasizes this is not a signal that they're going to be starting a news unit. And again, they point to the fact that, you could get other news channels through Prime Video. So from their perspective, like, we don't need to start a news division because, like, people can access news through our app anyway. But there's a lot of money here to be made, right? So television news is usually a money loser, right? And is getting worse and worse every year. But the profits made in election years where everyone wants to watch the news, kind of compensates for that. And that's how they make their money. So really, you can't look at yearly earnings for some of these news channels. You have to kind of look at it in like these like 4-year chunks, basically. So Amazon's probably thinking, okay, well, if we want to dip our toes into this, why not dip our toes in if election years are the most profitable times, why don't we do election night, which is arguably the biggest night of the year, right? And that's where you can make a lot of money. And again, live TV is on life support, right? It's really held up by two things: news and, more importantly, sports. So I think this is Amazon doing a fact-finding mission, right? If streamers like Amazon or Netflix, if they could just find a way to capture this market of live television, of live programming, it would be over for traditional television. Because news and sports are really the only reasons people still have their cable packages. So if they were able to get that content in other ways or more easily, it's going to be all over things like Spectrum and Charter and all those, DirecTV and all these, television providers. And the New York Times notes that Amazon, again, like I was saying, has already been dipping their toe in live programming, specifically sports. So Amazon has the rights for Thursday Night Football, like for the NFL. And recently, controversially, they acquired the rights to a whole host of NBA games that they kind of siphoned away from TNT and Warner Brothers. So, this is not preposterous, right? And will this... The questions are, how will this do? Will people choose this over other options, right? I feel like people, when it comes to news in our polarized media landscape, most people want to go to their trusted source. Like you're a Fox News person or you're a CNN person or an NBC or CBS, like you kind of have your channel. Or if you have regular cable and you have more channels, you might just flip around, like when one goes to commercial, go to the other one and go back and forth. That's what I used to do when I was a kid on election night. But people go to their trusted source. Prime Video is untested, so there's no, people don't not trust them necessarily when it comes to news, but people have a neutral net zero opinion. And Williams has baggage, right? So is that going to create problems, right? It seems like in this press release, they're really trying to emphasize this idea of like nonpartisan, as if something like CBS or like NBC is really that partisan. But, it seems like they're really trying to maybe capture that, oh, both sides suck. They're both crazy. So could this grow? Even if they don't start a news division, maybe this becomes a yearly tradition of doing the election night coverage. Could this program grow into a seemingly neutral or perceived neutral option in the years to come? And again, like I said, the Hollywood Reporter notes that the special is going to be available even if you don't have a Prime subscription or a Prime Video subscription. So maybe this is their way of trying to get people accustomed to using Prime for live news coverage. And they're kind of willing to lose some money now, or rather not make as much money as they could, and kind of plant the seeds for years to come. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So Kamala Harris, this last week on Wednesday, sat down with Fox News' Bret Baier for a 25-minute interview. The Guardian notes that, Baier, when it comes to the Fox News lineup, Bayer's considered more neutral, a more straight news counterbalance to Fox's, infamous opinion voices, right? Though that being said, he still works for Fox. He's still coming from a right-wing position, right? The interview was recorded live to tape, so what that means is that, when it was airing, it was not live, but they basically filmed it as if it were live. So it was not necessarily edited in any real way, except for maybe camera angles. And it brought in about 7.8 million viewers, which is a huge contrast from Bret Baier's Special Reports, which is his program that this was part of. That program usually only brings in about 2.5 million viewers per program, right? So why is Kamala Harris doing this? There's a couple of reasons here. So this seems to be a main push to try to appeal to the mythical undecided voter. I got a quote here from a Harris campaign communications director, Brian Fallon, saying, quote, I think there's a good number of independents and Haley-style Republicans, i.e. Nikki Haley, who are very open to voting for VP Harris, and that's why we're open to doing events with Republicans and on Fox News. We feel like we definitely achieved what we set out to achieve in the sense that she was able to reach an audience that's probably been not exposed to the arguments she's been making on the trail, and she's also going to show her toughness in standing tall against a hostile interviewer. End quote. So I'll talk about this more, but I feel like that's misguided because I don't know how many people you're in this kind of election you're going to convert away from Trump. So I'm not sure if that's going to work, but that's their strategy. In a secondary strategy here, or intention, is they're trying to draw a contrast with Donald Trump, right? This idea that kind of making it seem like Trump is not as aggressive, right? Or aggressive in the sense of he's not out there, taking more difficult interviews. Famously, he backed out of the 60 Minutes interview because he didn't like that they were going to be fact-checking him during the interview. And by contrast, she's out on Fox, right? So here's a quote from a Harris campaign spokesman, Ian Sams, saying, quote, as of today, it has been 1 month since Trump's been interviewed by a mainstream media outlet, as he has backed out of 60 Minutes and refuses to debate again. Meanwhile, Harris is willing to even go on Fox, end quote. So again, they're trying to draw this contrast. So what did the interview entail? I'm not going to get too much into this because this is not a political show, but just to kind of give us a sense of what's going on. So key things they touched on, that she really wanted to emphasize she's going to be a break from Biden. And this was a huge bit of damage control because previously she was on The View, and when she was asked what she would do differently than Joe Biden, she said, quote, there's nothing that comes to mind, and I've been part of most of the decisions that have had impact, end quote. As soon as she said that, all of her campaign staffers probably went like, what the fuck, what are you saying? Because even if you like what Biden did, people are not, it's perceived that people are unhappy about Biden administration policies. So if you're a VP, you want to distance yourself as much as you can from your predecessor. So there was a lot of, going back and forth about this. So in this interview, Brett Baer asked, quote, "So you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently," end quote. This idea of like basically, she really lacks a real vision and identity of her own, other than just, I'm not Trump and I'm not Biden, right? No one really knows like what she stands for. Or rather, like, she tells us what she stands for, but I'm not sure how many people believe it, right? Or like believe that she believes it. But anyway, so in this interview, her response was, quote, "Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. Like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me minutes ago, and the business sector and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make," end quote. Again, I think it's kind of a wishy-washy answer, because basically all she's saying is, like, by definition, I am not Joe Biden, because Joe Biden is Joe Biden, and I'm technically my own human being, so of course it'll be different. And it's like, well, yeah, but like policy-wise, like, what is going to be that different? She also asked about Trump supporters. Baer notes that half the country supports Trump, so he was like, if he's as dangerous as you're saying, why does half the country want to vote for him? Even going as far to ask, quote, "Are they stupid?" end quote. And her response was, "I would never say that about the American people." And in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish the American people. He's the one who talks about an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people, end quote. I think she was, she said exactly what she needed to, because obviously you can't go on Fox News and say, "Oh yeah, the Trump supporters are stupid." That's what got Hillary Clinton into so much trouble, by saying, the basket of deplorables. Personally, I would argue, of Trump supporters, half of them are stupid and the other half are self-interested. And that's not saying half the country is stupid, because, if half of his supporters are stupid, but less than half of Americans vote, so half of the half support him, and of that half are stupid. So it's more plausible that 1/8 of Americans are stupid. I mean, I could buy that. That doesn't seem that ridiculous. At least 1/8. Also talked briefly about transgender issues. He asked her if she supports, quote, "using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens transition to another gender," end quote. And Harris rebutted saying, quote, "I will follow the law, and it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed. You're probably familiar with it now. It's a public report that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis to people in the federal prison system," end quote. So again, trying to pivot by saying, okay, if Trump's criticizing me about that, he did the exact same thing. So why, what's the issue? Of course, immigration came up, which seems to be the biggest issue, even though I feel like it really shouldn't be, because I don't really understand. This is a sidebar. I'm not trying to get political, but no one has ever convincingly explained why, immigration's bad. If the answer is just, well, because it's illegal, then I would just say, okay, well, let's make it legal. And then people would still be against it. So besides racism, what's the issue? Like, why not just let in as many people as possible? Like, I don't understand what the issue is, frankly. But anyway, so this topic came up. Baer was trying to get her to say how many illegal immigrants have been released into the country under Biden, which felt like a very leading question. He wasn't really asking. He was just wanting her to admit to something, I suppose. And she tried to pivot to talking about the immigration bill, this bipartisan bill that was fairly conservative, that would have put more restrictions in place at the border, but Trump basically called a bunch of Republicans in Congress to basically say, don't vote for it, because if you vote for this, then the issue won't be there, and it's going to help me if this issue exists and I can run on it. So she tried pivoting and talking about the immigration bill and how if that had been passed, this wouldn't have been as big of a problem. But Baer kept interrupting her, and he got a lot of flack for interrupting her. And, I think it's important. But I'm going to put a pin in that. Let me just finish here. And then another thing they talked about was talking about Trump and the way the media covers Trump. And Harris directly called out Fox News for sanitizing Trump's rhetoric. Again, he's reasonably using terms like, quote, enemy from within, end quote. Very, very unsettling language. And people will say, oh, he doesn't mean it. It's like, but I believe him when he says it. Like, he's been a man of his word, you know, like he's very clear about how he feels and what he thinks. You know, in response to this, Brett Baer played a clip of Trump responding to Democratic backlash. I guess there was an issue of, like, they played the wrong clip because her point was, like, you guys don't call him out for it. And he was like, yes, we do. Here's a clip of us calling him out. But, like, in that clip, they're not calling him out. So Harris responds to that by saying, Brett, I'm sorry, that is not what he has been saying about the enemy within, that he's repeated when speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed, end quote. Again, Baer later admitted a different clip should have played, saying, quote, when I called for a soundbite, I was expecting a piece of enemy from within from Maria Bartiromo's interview to be tied to the piece from your town hall, Harris, where you asked the former president about the enemy from within. It just had the piece about the town hall. My point was that we asked him about the question about that sentence and what he was trying to mean, end quote. But again, okay, even if that's true, what do you mean trying to find out what he was trying to mean? Like, I think it's very explicit. Like, I don't know. Again, this is, I think, the issue with Fox News, and I'm sure you could say the liberal media outlets do the same thing with liberal or Democrat presidents, but at least just looking at this, it's like you're giving him a lot of leeway here, benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't know how else you could interpret enemy from within. So again, the reaction to the interview, a lot of people were not happy the way Baer kept interrupting Harris. During the interview, she would even say, quote, may I please finish responding? I'm in the middle of responding to the point you're making, and I'd like to finish, end quote. And, the New York Times notes his first interruption was only like 30 seconds into the interview, right? So this isn't necessarily an issue of like, oh, okay, near the end he was getting frustrated and wanted to move on to something else and was interrupting her. And, I don't necessarily have a problem with this because journalists should challenge candidates when they're just regurgitating, talking points. But it seems like he did it a little bit too often. And also, it's just not a good look when, you're interrupting a woman, right? Even if it's a double standard, if it's not fair, it's just a bad look. Actress, I don't know why, I just thought it was a funny quote, but, a serious political commentator, actress Yvette Nicole Brown from like Community and Drake and Josh, said, quote, would you have interrupted any other VP of our country the way you rudely interrupted and tried to talk over Kamala Harris, asking for every woman in America, end quote. So yeah, this feeling of that it's, it's just a little uncomfortable when it's a woman, unfortunately. And again, but part of all this, Baer claimed that he was frustrated before the interview even began. So it was scheduled an hour before his own show was supposed to go on the air. And he said, quote, we were going to do 25 to 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. Then the vice president showed up at about 5:15. We were pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock show. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to, redirect without me trying to interrupt, end quote. And I sympathize with that. And I'm sure the Harris team did that intentionally to schedule it, like, kind of right up. So, kind of catch him off his game, like, put him on his back foot. But the question with all of this is really, it doesn't really matter about all these little details. The big question is, was this successful? Did the Harris team get out of this what they wanted? She's not necessarily known for being good on her feet. She's not known for these, like, fiery Fox News appearances, the way you'll have Pete Buttigieg or Gavin Newsom or her VP, Tim Walz, right? Who's going on Fox News all the time. This is not necessarily her wheelhouse. Again, like I was saying, is this really the voter base that she needs to be going after? I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a pollster. We're not going to know now, and maybe even 50 years from now, we won't really know the full story. But I firmly believe this election it's her success is going to be rooted in not converting Trump supporters, but activating disaffected voters who are either going to vote for a third party in these swing states or just not vote at all. That's who she needs to win over. Personally, I'll tell you right now, I don't care what anyone says. I'm voting for third party. I'm not going to be supporting either candidate. I think Kamala Harris is conservative. Trump is just a reactionary. He's like an ultra conservative. So she needs to worry about people like me. I mean, not me because I'm in New York. She's going to win New York. But it's the people like me that she needs to win over. And I always hate, if you watch this channel, I hate people trying to demonize not voting for one of the primary candidates. Electoral politics is about persuading voters. So if you've decided you're going to take certain policy positions, you're going to gain supporters by doing that. You're also going to lose some. No one owes you their vote. So if you want those votes, you need to appeal to their interests and policy positions. So I feel like she's just going after the wrong. She's making the same mistakes Hillary Clinton did. I think you got to go bigger. She had the most momentum when it seemed like she was going to be a much more progressive. It was going to be a much more progressive campaign. She's just become way too cautious. She lost her momentum by trying to cling to the center, making a lot of the mistakes Hillary Clinton made. Because again, it just doesn't seem like she stands for anything. For better or for worse, whether you like him or not, you believe Bernie Sanders believes what he's saying. And it's just, it'll be interesting to see. And the election's only about 2 weeks away. So we're going to know very soon if this worked out for her or not. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So John D. Miller, I want to say John D. Rockefeller. John D. Miller, who's the former CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of NBC Universal, published an op-ed in U.S. News, which is like a publication, titled, "We Created a Monster. Trump was a TV fantasy invented for the Apprentice." And here's a little bit. I'm going to kind of pepper in this story with some quotes, but I think this kind of initial quote kind of gives you a sense of the thesis here. In the op-ed, he says, quote, "For nearly 25 years, I led marketing at NBC and NBC Universal. I led the team that marketed The Apprentice, the reality show that made Donald Trump a household name outside of New York City, where he was better known for overextending his empire and appearing in celebrity gossip columns," end quote. So here's the context for this. So Trump's rise was in the business world, in real estate. He was primarily known in the business world. He was obviously a larger than life figure in New York. So a lot of people knew him. In the 1990s, in order to offset some of the financial setbacks that he had been experiencing, he started licensing his name to projects, right? So that also spread his name around. Later on, in the late 90s, early 2000s, producer Mark Burnett approached Trump about making a reality television show. Trump reportedly said reality TV, quote, "was for the bottom feeders of society," end quote, which is funny considering he maybe is the most infamous reality TV star. But he was convinced when Burnett said that it would highlight his success and luxurious lifestyle. And from the op-ed, Miller says, quote, "To sell the show, we created the narrative that Trump was a super successful businessman who lived like royalty. That was the conceit of the show. At the very least, it was a substantial exaggeration. At worst, it created a false narrative by making him seem more successful than he was," end quote. And that's the thing. He was very successful, especially in his early years. But by the time you get to 2004... his success is way less, just in terms of things not making as much money, or things not panning out, or losing money, debts, bankruptcies, all this stuff. But of course, this went on to be The Apprentice, right? The famous reality competition show. It was wildly successful for NBC. It ran from 2004 to 2017, and it featured Trump as like the host/judge for 14 of the 15 seasons. So it was just that one last season where they tried to do it without Trump once he had become president, or I think he was on the campaign trail when they were filming it. I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who replaced him, and it fell completely flat. But the key thing here is that it introduced Trump to a national audience, right, of people who maybe knew him in passing or didn't even know him at all. Miller says in his op-ed, quote, "At NBC, we promoted the show relentlessly. Thousands of 30-second promo spots that spread the fantasy of Trump's supposed business acumen were beamed over the airwaves to nearly every household in the country. The image of Trump that we promoted was highly exaggerated. In its own way, it was fake news that we spread over America like a heavy snowstorm. I never imagined that the picture we painted of Trump as a successful businessman would help catapult him to the White House," end quote. So again, a lot of people, assumed Trump was this like incredible businessman, which really helped once he ran for president. People were like, "Oh yeah, like I think maybe he would be good. We need a businessman president." In the op-ed, Miller also provides some observations of Trump that are bad enough in their own right, like in a vacuum, but are very much applicable to his political life. So he's very manipulatable, right? Saying, quote, I discovered in my interactions with him over the years that he is manipulative, yet extraordinarily easy to manipulate. He has an unfillable compliment hole. No amount is too much. Flatter him and he is compliant. World leaders, including apparently Russian strongman Vladimir Putin and North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, have discovered that too, end quote. So this idea that, Trump is not as resolute as he maybe would seem. He's a lot more swayable, right? He also notes he's a pathological liar. In the op-ed, he says, quote, I learned early on in my dealings with Trump that he thought he could simply say something over and over, and eventually people would believe it. He would say to me, The Apprentice, America's #1 TV show. But it wasn't. Not that week, not that season. I had the ratings in front of me. He had seen and heard the ratings, but that didn't matter. He just kept saying it was the #1 show on television, even after we corrected him. He repeated it on press tours too, knowing full well it was wrong. He didn't like being fact-checked back then either, end quote. Again, this idea that, Trump is the king of if you say a lie enough times, it becomes the truth, right? You will it into existence. And he also notes in his op-ed here that Trump has poor judgment, saying, quote, at the wrap party for The Apprentice Season 3, he pitched an idea for the upcoming season. He told me we should make a team of black players to compete against white players. My first thought was, WTF? I tried to get through to him by speaking the language he understands, money. I explained that sponsors wouldn't want to be associated with the show that pitted races against each other, but he could not understand why this was such a bad idea. And no, we did not use this idea, end quote. So, at the very least, Trump is very, very racially insensitive, if not being just this is really racist. And again, like I was saying, it was arguably his success from The Apprentice that made his presidential campaign possible. Without The Apprentice, I don't know if he ever would have had a chance of even becoming the nominee, let alone winning the general election. Because again, by 2016, people felt. It's going to be studied for decades how Trump won the election. And there's all different groups that voted for him for very different reasons. Sometimes they overlapped and stuff. But I would say one of the big reasons, the one I heard all the time, I remember hearing about Trump maybe running in 2012. And as a dumb kid who didn't know anybody, I was like, maybe that would be good. Because, maybe he's a successful businessman, theoretically, right? There was this image of him. Again, by 2016, people felt we maybe needed a business mind in the White House. We needed someone to treat America like a business and get it back on track. And again, at least in people's mind, Trump was like the quintessential American businessman. Miller says in his op-ed, quote, while we were successful in marketing The Apprentice, we also did irreparable harm by creating the false image of Trump as a successful leader. I deeply regret that, and I regret that it's taken me so long to go public, end quote. I don't know if this is really something you need to go public with. I think this is all public knowledge, but I understand what he's trying to say here. And if nothing else, this just goes to show the impact of reality television, in how there's an implicit acceptance of what we're seeing on reality TV. But reality TV is just as fabricated as a quote-unquote fiction. Reality television is not to be believed. Moments can be staged. Even moments that are not staged, that are authentic moments, can be edited in deceptive ways. And then also just the fact that, choosing what to show and how to show it betrays a subjectivity, right? A point of view. And most likely that point of view is an intentional desire to sensationalize whatever's happening. So, again, it's a very interesting story that helps kind of paint the larger picture of how Donald Trump ended up becoming the most powerful man on the planet, if only for 4 years, and hopefully for only 4 years. Please go out and vote, and don't vote for Trump. But I want you to go vote. I'm very pro voting. I don't care who you're gonna vote for, but I think it's gonna be a little dicey if he wins again. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. So the Diddy lawsuits keep on coming. So a new lawsuit is alleging that Macy's, the department store, corporation, helped cover up one of Diddy's sexual attacks at its flagship Herald Square store in 2008. pictured above me. It's filed anonymously by a John Doe, and the lawsuit is accusing Diddy of orally raping him. And that furthermore, the lawsuit claims that the company acted on behalf of Diddy to protect a multi-million-dollar deal with Sean Combs' clothing brand. So here's the details, in a little more detail here, if you could even stomach it, because it's just awful. So the plaintiff, John Doe, worked as an advisor for the rival clothing company Echo Unlimited. I only know them because they made some really cool sneakers, and I've never really been into shoes, but I remember I really wanted these cool really cool white, crisp, white sneakers with like the little rhino logo on them. They were really cool. Anyway, so this guy, this John Doe worked for this rival clothing company. And one day he was at this Macy's location. He was working in the stockroom of the store that day. In the stockroom, Diddy's bodyguards violently attacked him. And Vice notes, the publication Vice notes that they struck him and they also threatened to kill him. And then Diddy forced the plaintiff to perform oral sex on him. During the assault, calling him Echo, almost as if his attacking and demeaning this man was a way for him to work out his frustration with his commercial competitor. It's just really, really strange. And then according to the lawsuit, Diddy then immediately, quote, began passing out merchandise to an adoring crowd as if nothing had happened, end quote. So understandably, the plaintiff reported the incident immediately to Macy's security. He received no follow-up, and he ended up being banned from the store. And then the lawsuit also claims, quote, approximately 3 weeks later, Terry Lundgren, who was the CEO of Macy's, pressured Echo Unlimited, his boss, pressured the Echo Unlimited's executives to fire the plaintiff because Macy's had just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Sean John Clothing, which I guess is Diddy's was his brand. And it worked. He was subsequently fired and lost his company-paid apartment. Interestingly, though, in this lawsuit, he's not suing Echo, which I feel like you would include. So I'm not sure why he's not, and maybe smarter legal minds could explain why, maybe, but that does seem kind of strange. And the plaintiff, quote, believes that the report of the assault was destroyed or otherwise purged from Macy's record, and no action was ever taken as a result of the report, end quote. And to this day, the plaintiff, quote, fears for his life, end quote. So, of course, this is just one little footnote. This awful situation is just this tiny little part of this larger tapestry of Diddy's, the lawsuits and accusations against Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. Diddy. He's been accused of hundreds of assaults and other crimes at this point. And I think the number of lawsuits is also in the 3-digit range at this point. And I actually did a video about this a couple of weeks ago about, how, there are these people in the shadows. There are powerful people who are going to be exposed by all of this. Either they took part in his wrongdoing or they helped cover it up because it would be beneficial for him or beneficial for them, or they turned a blind eye. And the thing I had asked in that video was, who else is going to be named in these lawsuits and in these accusations? And again, this shows the complicity of powerful parties. It's not that Macy's enjoys sexual assault happening in their stores. It doesn't support sexual assault as a position. But they're willing, but money and capitalism drive everything. And they're willing, companies like this, or people, right? This, because I'm sure we're going to hear about people. They're willing to turn a blind eye, or in this case, even help cover up indiscretion or crimes if it helps them financially. So fuck Macy's. I hope they get everything coming to them, and I'm very interested to see who else is going to be named, what other powerful people benefited from Diddy's crimes. Okay, so that basically wraps up the show. Just want to give a few quick plugs. This isn't my only YouTube channel. I have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment, in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, take a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between using these cartoon versions of the old and young version of myself. It's a lot of fun. Go check out the video. It'd be really great for you to comment. Let me know how you disagree with everything I said. You can find the link in the description down below. Also want to give a plug to a podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's Why I Call It Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment. The good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Star Wars, which has been so much fun. This upcoming Friday, I think we're launching our episode on The Force Awakens, which I think is actually going to be our longest episode ever. I'm not going to say how long it is, but it's very meaty. So if you like a deep dive conversation about Star Wars, definitely go check it out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the description down below. And then finally, I want to give a plug to Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write written reviews for new movies coming out. I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. I have over 100 reviews, a bunch of different kinds of movies. Oh, excuse me. I have all these burps I'm trying to hold in. It would really be great if you go check that out. You can find the link in the description down below, or you can just go to your browser, type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. That's it for this week. Thank you all so much for watching. Please, if you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with people finding the channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe. We're trying to grow the community. I loved all the comments during the show. It's super great to have you all. And until next time, peace out. If I can find the button.